Hello, friends. Today we're going to be talking about apologies. If you have a poor relationship with apologies, then please don't worry about it. A lot of people do, and I have a suspicion that it's because of how we're exposed to apologies in childhood. An apology can be framed as a get out of jail free card for doing bad things, and if you don't accept an apology, then perhaps you were told that you were the bad guy for holding a grudge. Not bitter. Being forced to give and to accept insincere apologies from people really shapes how we view the apology as a communication tool, and that's something I want to work on correcting today. First of all, an apology has 4 components, each of which must be considered necessary in order for the apology to be valid. That's right, friends, there's a list. There's always a list. God, I love lists. In an apology, the person apologizing takes responsibility for their actions, acknowledges the harm that their actions have done, expresses regret for causing that harm, and outlines how they will prevent that harm from happening again. If any of those 4 parts are missing, then it's not a valid apology and must be viewed with suspicion. If any of those 4 parts are phoned in, then it is not a valid apology and must be viewed with suspicion. If the apology contains all of those parts, it is sincerely delivered, and the behavior continues, then that person must, in general, be viewed with suspicion. An apology without change is manipulation. It's important to note that sometimes an insincere apology is part of the social script, and those are not the apologies I'm talking about. Saying, "I'm sorry for keeping you waiting" when you pick up a phone call from hold isn't an apology, it's you following the social script and behaving as expected for that situation. That circumstance is not what we're talking about right now. So, let's talk about those 4 parts of an apology in a little more depth. First, taking responsibility. This one is commonly misunderstood, and it's important to note that in a situation where you made no choices, took no independent actions, and were unable to affect the situation, you have nothing to apologize for. This is a good time for a social sorry. More on that in a bit. Or you can do what I do and simply not apologize for these situations, but understand that this will affect your rapport with everyone around you, and it is very easy to seem cold and uncaring when you do this. Approach with caution. Tips and tricks for navigating the social sorry later. When you take responsibility for your actions, you are identifying what you did. Be specific and only bring up the things that were choices on your part. If there's nothing that you could have done differently, then you have nothing to apologize for. Ought implies can, and the contrapositive is also true. Cannot implies ought not. You are not responsible for the things that you could not have done. So to build an example apology, let's look at a common dispute among people who share a bedroom. I hit the snooze button 7 times before getting up. Here we're using plain language to identify the exact behavior that we did that is the issue. It is critical that we do not use soft language or attempt any obfuscation when we take responsibility. We will not use euphemisms to hide our behavior, and we will not shy away from the fact that we made a choice that hurt someone. Second, acknowledging harm. This may be the longest section of the apology, and that's fine and normal. Many times there's more than one way for an action to have been harmful, and you will want to acknowledge as many of those consequences as you can possibly think of. Acknowledging the harm that we've caused is the part that helps preserve this relationship so that it might survive beyond this conflict, especially in cases where we have done significant harm. It also helps us preserve our reputation and rapport with any bystanders who may witness the apology. If you've ever been forced to apologize professionally to a colleague, then understand that by fully outlining all of the harms that resulted from your actions, you forestall any future complaints and paint yourself as a thoughtful and considerate person who made a mistake. And hopefully you actually are a thoughtful and considerate person who made a mistake and not simply taking notes from this video in order to get away with doing inconsiderate and thoughtless things. Anyway, expanding this section out as far as you think you can get away with demonstrates that you've considered your actions fully and understand the extent of the harm that you've caused. So to expand on our example apology, I hit the snooze button 7 times before waking up. I do this multiple times a week and it disturbs your sleep, which is unfair and unreasonable to you. I know it's hard to get back to sleep when suddenly disturbed, and I put you in that position for over an hour repeatedly because I just didn't want to get up. That was inconsiderate and selfish of me in general, but last week when you had to go into work early for a meeting and I knew that and I still hit the snooze button a bunch, it was especially inconsiderate of me. Third, express regret. Sometimes this is the part where you say the words "I'm sorry," but it isn't always. In fact, an apology can be a great apology without ever using the word sorry. However, even without saying the word, we need to be very clear about how sincerely we regret having caused the harm that we just outlined. Many times expressing regret is bundled together with acknowledging harm, and that can make it hard to distinguish the two when looking at an apology. Do not mistake belittling yourself for expressing regret. In our example apology, when we refer to our behavior as inconsiderate and selfish, that's not expressing regret. That is acknowledging the way that our behavior looks on the outside, which is part of acknowledging harm. It's acknowledging the harm that our actions have done to our reputation in relationships rather than direct harms to another person, but it is still acknowledging harms and not expressing regret. This is the time for sincerity, and it is the only time that it's appropriate to make the apology about you. Keep it short, keep it honest, keep it clear. And as always, we want to use plain language and never hide behind euphemism or rhetoric. So we're going to add a bit to our apology. I'm sorry that I've repeatedly disturbed your sleep. It was me putting my wants above yours, and that is unfair and unreasonable of me. Fourth, prevention planning. This is the cherry on top of a beautiful apology, and done well, it can eliminate any future discussion and lift the emotional obligation from the other person going forward. This step can be thought of as you taking responsibility for your future actions, whereas earlier you took responsibility for your past actions. Identify some solutions, and also identify some potential pitfalls that you may encounter when implementing those solutions. Be realistic. You want these solutions to be something that you can actually do. So, when thinking about how to prevent this issue from coming up in the future, take a look at how you got into this position in the first place. It's okay for this section to be a bit lengthy, and it's also okay to come to the apology without a solution planned, as long as you're prepared to include the person you wronged in planning your prevention. The best apology I ever received was from someone who had deeply and personally wronged me, and they had some suggestions, some of which they'd already acted upon, but they still wanted my input on what they could do that they hadn't considered. That gesture went a long way towards preserving our relationship, and we're still friends. So, our complete apology now looks like this. I hit the snooze button 7 times before waking up. I do this multiple times a week, and it disturbs your sleep, which is unfair and unreasonable to you. I know it's hard to get back to sleep when suddenly disturbed, and I put you in that position for over an hour repeatedly because I just didn't want to get up. That was inconsiderate and selfish of me in general, but last week when you had to go into work early for a meeting and I knew that and I still hit the snooze button a bunch, it was especially inconsiderate of me. I'm sorry that I've repeatedly disturbed your sleep. It was me putting my wants above yours, and that is unfair and unreasonable of me. I'm getting a smartwatch with a vibrate alarm function so that my alarms won't disturb you, and the loud alarm can be a last chance alarm that will only go off the one time if the vibrate alarm doesn't wake me. I'll be trying to get better sleep as well so I don't have as much trouble waking up in the morning by not consuming caffeine after 6 p.m., and I've already put a blue light filter on my phone, which is supposed to help. Can you think of anything else that I can do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Boom! Apologized! That only took 3 pages. If you keep the 4 steps in mind, you don't have to break it all the way down the way I have here, and you can get very, very good at apologizing, depending on how many mistakes you make. Now, let's take the pin out of that social sorry, because I almost got sidetracked by it, and I don't want to forget it completely. There are some situations where the social sorry is part of the script that's in play. It's an expected behavior, and missing it will damage the interaction. Honestly, when the gal at the drive-thru window says, "I'm sorry for the wait, what can I get started for you?" I am not expecting her to say, "I made you wait in your car while I handled another customer issue. This spent your time in a way that is counterproductive to the goals of having a drive-thru, and that was inconsiderate of me, etc., etc., etc." I mean, just imagine receiving a 4-step apology from someone who bumped into your cart at the grocery store. It would be ridiculous. But if you don't get an apology at all, then you dislike that person. And I'd put even odds that as soon as you leave, you are texting someone about this jerk at the store who just bumped into your cart and didn't even apologize. What an asshole. Sometimes in de-escalation situations, you thought this wasn't going to have anything to do with de-escalation. You thought this was just a life skills episode. But no, friends, it's always de-escalation here. Everything is de-escalation. It's de-escalation all the way down. Using the words "I'm sorry" or "I apologize" is some necessary social lubricant. It's related to teaming, it can be used in conjunction with creating a bad cop, and it fulfills the social script. It's almost always okay to apologize for a neutral circumstance that you have no control over. "I'm sorry for your wait. That sucks, I apologize." And "I'm sorry that happened to you" are all social sorries for a neutral circumstance. Do not ever, ever, ever apologize for someone else's actions or feelings, especially not the person you're apologizing to. "I'm sorry you feel that way" is an inconsiderate abomination that does nothing to preserve rapport. It does not express remorse. It is a canned statement that reveals your apathy towards another person and their experiences. I loathe the phrase "I'm sorry you feel that way," and I've personally seen it destroy de-escalations because it gives the escalated person something to fight, and rightfully so. Oh, You're sorry that I was left in the waiting room for 4 hours with no update about my loved one's condition. I'm sure you're sorry that you couldn't take 5 minutes to come talk to me. It's not unreasonable to want some information, but you couldn't even do that. And I'm gonna stop myself here because I will rant about false apologies for a long time if you let me. If you use a social sorry, keep it to a circumstance that you have no control over and keep it short. This is not a situation where you need to explain why you're sorry or how the situation came to be such that you are now apologizing. Follow the script that's in play, make the social sorry, and move on. So that's apologies. I'm really curious about this one. Were you ever taught how to apologize? What's your strongest memory about an apology? Have you ever had an apology backfire? How do you construct your apologies? And if you use a different method, what is it? This one ran a bit long, but I have a lot to say on the topic. So if you have any stories, additions, or corrections, put them in the comments and I will address some of them next time. Be smart, stay safe. Bye.